Okay, I think we're at 10 a.m. Eastern now. I think there's a few people still making their way into the meeting. We can kind of get started and a few minutes here before we actually get into the presentation. So welcome to day 3 of the second Canadian Flood Forecasting Forum. I think we've had a great first 2 days and really appreciate everybody that's come back for day 3. I'm familiar with many of the participants this week, including several of you today. I'm also a new face to many of you, though, so I'll start with a quick introduction. My name's Jacob Brookser. I'm a senior engineer with Environment and Climate Change Canada. I'll be chairing this morning's session before handing over to Evan and Al again this afternoon for the breakout sessions we have planned. I guess word of warning, this is my first day of my second week on the job. I officially started my current position last Tuesday, and I'll be focusing on hydrologic prediction support through the National Hydrologic Service, Eastern region. So that's primarily Ontario, east to the Atlantic, but also contributing elsewhere as well. Not new to Environment Climate Change Canada, though. I've been here with the department for 15 years, or a little over 15 years, I guess, working primarily on transboundary Canada-US water issues, specifically in the Great Lakes St. Lawrence River Basin. Actually, like a lot of, I think, your offices and your work, the provinces and territories, my office, or former office, I guess, is more operationally focused. We're responsible for providing engineering and technical support to the IJC. We had a presentation on that on Monday. Specifically to the boards that regulate the outflows from Lake Superior and Lake Ontario, and that includes, among other things, issuing monthly and weekly forecasts of Great Lakes water levels and flows. So some overlap there, some parallels with your work there. What that doesn't include, though, is issuing short-term storm surge wave forecasts and all the related flood messaging that goes with that. That's in Ontario, that's responsibility of the province. Also the conservation authorities, even in the international Great Lakes, that's the case. So I guess just 2 quick points I want to make that are really relevant to our discussion this week. Over the past 4 years, the Great Lakes have been in a severe high water event stemming from really exceptionally wet conditions starting in 2017 and continuing through till, well, last year at least, and even into the beginning parts of this year. Won't go into the details there, but just 2 points I wanted to make. So start of the event, in part by necessity and in part by demand, our Great Lakes NHS office, we were working closely with the research and development teams from ECCC. So this is Dorothy, Vincent, Etienne, some of the people we've had presenting this week. Began making better use of some of the products that they have available, including the hydrologic prediction of inflows to Lake Ontario. Again, I won't get into details there, but just wanted to highlight that they've been providing us with several products from several model configurations, a lot of which were discussed yesterday, and that we now use as additional forecast guidance, not a forecast, but as guidance that we use to improve our forecast capabilities. And we've had a lot of success with that, and really appreciate that partnership. So in that way, I've considered myself, up to now, my former team, we're very much users of some of the products available from Environment Climate Change Canada, applying and adapting them to our real world problems. Similar to how you might consider yourselves, our partners, current or potential operational users. The other point I wanted to make before getting into today, also in 2017, we started making stronger connections, working more closely with the Surface Water Monitoring Center in Ontario, with the province of Ontario. So this is Amber Langmuir, Dave Bert, others, some of whom are on this call today. And through them, the conservation authorities around the Great Lakes Basin. And this has been a really great partnership. We've been able to kind of informally facilitate the sharing of information, products, and tools in support of hydrologic prediction. Again, even though the federal government has some transboundary water responsibilities, it's a provincial responsibility to actually issue the shorter term flood forecast and also the flood messaging that goes along with that. And so just wanted to highlight that I'm really proud of the success that we've had in supporting each other in those roles and responsibilities, including the technical forecasting stuff and sharing information related to that, enhanced support for communications, and anyways, personally look forward to continuing that with them and hopefully developing similar relationships, supporting all of you in the important roles that you fulfill in your province or territory, in your region. So I don't want to go on any further than that. Just thought I'd share that kind of personal example. As we head into day 3, we're going to be talking a lot about these shared roles and responsibilities, partnerships that we've got here, looking at hydrologic prediction, flood forecasting across Canada in specific regions, the provincial and territorial level today, some of the challenges you face, maybe some of the parallels among areas, even some of the differences, and then talking a little bit about the future of these shared partnerships. And so really looking forward to today. Again, fairly new to this hydrologic prediction file, but looking forward to learning additional information from you folks as we progress through day 3. I think Al's on here now, and Al, did you want to share a few words prior to getting into things?
Yeah, just thanks for that, Jacob. And yeah, Jacob's a real asset to this community of practice, right? Because he has the practical experience. So does Evan, actually, in the West, because he has the practical experience from being the forecaster in Alberta. So both of these folks come by it honestly, and I'm sure they can help the community move forward with some of this work that Environment Canada is doing. So that's great. I just wanted to mention quickly, and I don't want to start off on a low note here, but just wanted to acknowledge those of you who kind of a friend of ours in the community, Bart Ojima, passed away on February 20th. And so I'll put a link in to the details into on the chat there about Bart. There's obviously an obituary in the web page. I don't know if those of you who knew Bart, he was with the Water Security Agency in Saskatchewan, and we had a lot in common. We both lived in Saskatchewan. We both went to Waterloo, and Bart was a great guy. So anyways, I thought we would just kind of honor him. I'll send the link out, and those of you who know him, hopefully this isn't a surprise. But yeah, kind of a sad day for the community. But Bert was a great hydrologist, and so I just wanted to acknowledge that today, and I'll put the link up on the site here in a second. So, okay, Evan, did you want to mention anything before we get started here? Because I think we're ready to go, and looking forward to hearing all of the updates from our provincial colleagues, and I'm hoping the students and the postdocs pay close attention here and learn a lot, because there's lots going on in Canada, and it's a diverse hydrology, right? So, you know, every province, every region does things a little differently for good reason, right? And so it'll be very instructive, I think, for our students and our postdocs to follow up on that. So Evan, anything you want to add, or are we good to start? I guess not. Is Evan here? I don't see
he may actually be over in the old invite, still trying to get the last few people over into the newer Teams meeting today. So
fair enough. Okay, so I'll pass it back to you, Jacob, and you can chair the rest of the session. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, Al. So yeah, this morning we've got a series of presentations from, I think, most of the provinces and territories, and actually maybe if you don't even have a presentation, if you just want to speak to the work you're doing in hydrologic prediction, flood forecasting here, that's fine too. We'll also be really diving into this further this afternoon in the breakout groups. So we don't have a set agenda this morning, but I thought we'd just kind of go in order from west to, starting in the west, also then go to the north and then the east. So we'll start with BC. I don't have a list of names as to who's participating, but if you're folks from BC, I guess to start, if you want to share your presentation, and then we'll kind of go BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, then Yukon, Northwest Territories. I don't believe anybody from Nunavut's presenting, and then we'll go from Ontario east after that. So whoever's planning to present for BC, if you've got a presentation, please go ahead and share your screen. Just while you're doing that, I guess, J'apprends français maintenant. Alors, nous avons beaucoup de francophones qui participent et partagent leur information et leurs connaissances avec nous cette semaine. Je veux vous remercier pour ça, c'est très important. Aussi, je veux vous remercier pour faire des présentations en anglais pour moi et les autres. Alors, aujourd'hui, si vous voulez poser des questions ou des commentaires en français, c'est bien. Il y a plusieurs membres de notre équipe qui sont heureuses de traduire si vous souhaitez. Also, just a good reminder for all of us, we are on day 3 now of a fairly long week, and we've only got 5 minutes for presentations, 5 minutes for questions today. So we'll try to stay on time. It's not a lot of time. Just a reminder though, presenters, you might be tempted to rush through your presentation as I would, but just remember we've got a lot of folks here that maybe English isn't their first language, and after a long week, just a reminder, try to speak slowly, clearly, not rush. We'll have to keep it short, but maybe not quick, if that makes sense. So with that being said, I'm not sure if we've got, do we have anybody from BC able to jump on here and
yes, hopefully
perfect.
You guys can hear me.
Yeah, maybe introduce yourself. Thanks, Dave.
Right.
Maybe introduce yourself and then go ahead.
All right, yeah, I'm Dave Campbell. I'm the head of the BC River Forecast Center. I've been in this role for about 10 years now, so it's finding a great opportunity to be here to be able to talk about some of the work we've been doing over the last couple years since we last met. And I'm trying to share my screen, and I don't know. Right. You able to see that?
Yeah, we can see it. Maybe just put it in presentation mode. There you go.
Yeah, so I'll try to just breeze through. Obviously, a lot going on in our group. Our team is very service focused, and whether that be the general public or specific stakeholders like the emergency management community within the province, as well as local governments across BC. One of the key things we've been working on in the last 5 to 7 years has been the development and enhancement of our in-house numeric forecasting capacity. We've done that through the development of an internal lump sum forecast hydrologic model, what we call the Clever model. Over the last couple of years, or even in this year, we've been working to expand that model. We're up now to modeling pretty much most of the Water Survey of Canada hydrometric locations in the province. So we've got about 250 locations now that we're forecasting. We do that on a daily basis during periods of need. So that's not necessarily year round, but during focus periods, certainly through the spring freshet. We've completed an update to our flood frequency analysis. So part of model output that we give, we provide details on the return period estimates for various areas. We keep that up to date as best we can, and that has also been an interesting tool for us to be able to monitor changes in frequency that we're seeing in peak flows across the province. This year, we've added some new functionality to the model output, including trying to incorporate visualization of model error into the forecast we go. And I've got an example there from a Clever model output. And what we're doing right now is incorporating historic analysis of model forecast error as part of the display that we put in terms of uncertainty. We're going to be working on developing what we're representing in that in the future, particularly as we start to bring in ensemble forecast data. But we've done that change this year. At the moment, these forecasts are both internal and external, so we do publish these out to stakeholders and the public. So there's in support of that, we've created some material, kind of interpretive guides to help users interpret the information that is there. On the data side of things, quite a lot of work that we do in terms of managing forecast data that we use. So ingesting various bits of data. We've developed a bit of a quality control procedure that we use to pre-process data to get it into the modeling. That's something that's been enhanced in the last couple of years. We're definitely moving towards a lot of our data handling in terms of analysis and interpretation through our code. So we've developed a lot of internal tools that we're using now that are just creating statistical analysis of things like snowpack or streamflow. And we're also working to kind of have that as open source code, the analysis as part of that procedure, so people can access that. And we're kind of in the process of doing a more enhanced version of that. But a lot of our code goes into underpinning tools that we either use internally or externally. We've been trying to get one project that we've been able to implement over this past year has been an update on the seasonal volume forecast that we produce. It's a fairly limited scope in terms of the amount of seasonal forecasting that we're doing. There's about a dozen or so locations around the province, and we were able to update 4 of our key locations over the past year. And that's been really helpful to be able to bring in current updates in terms of just we've got about a decade of additional data. The last time this was updated was in about 2009. We've moved to the modeling was, we outsourced the project development from this. It's a fair bit more sophisticated than our older models in that it incorporates a broad range of input forecast variables, including things like the seasonal weather forecast from Environment Canada, the CANSIPS forecast. That was something that was specifically recommended out of an audit review that was done following flooding that happened in 2017 in the province. And I was a bit skeptical of whether that was going to provide improved model performance, but in the end, it actually has shown to provide some added value to the seasonal forecast. So it's been quite an interesting improvement on that side of things. The other thing that has been sort of interesting out of this project has been an indication that the systems themselves seem to be less predictable. And I think an ongoing question that we have is statistical approaches to seasonal forecasting, particularly in a changing climate. Is that the best approach, and can we really rely on historic measures of what's been going on as a suitable measure for predicting the future? Another kind of key component or things that I've been working on there is really kind of, as I mentioned before, our key focus is on service delivery. We've been able to do a lot of that work up until now really has been on the backs of having a really skilled team and really focused on in-house development of work. So over the last few years, a lot of focus has been on producing material that is accessible by stakeholders and users, including web mapping tools, for example, leveraging the ArcGIS online map solutions. And really putting out most of the information that we develop is posted out to the web. So this year is starting to see quite a big uptake in terms of how much people are using that. About 500,000 uses of web material that the River Forecast Centre is producing, and that's within the kind of top 1% of government websites within the BC province. In recognition, a lot of the work that the River Forecast Centre team has done over the last few years, getting the Clever model running, getting kind of these products out to users. A big achievement for the team this year was being recognized by a Premier's Award a few weeks ago in terms of that business transformation and organizational excellence around the work, getting that information out. In terms of some projects that are in progress at the moment, we have work being undertaken to develop a workflow around the ingest and use of ensemble weather forecasting from the JEPS forecast. And we're hoping within the next month or so to be able to have that up and running. And at this stage, it's really looking at the workflow side of things, getting the data and processing it. And then we'll work over the next year to implement that within the modeling that we're doing. We've got a couple of projects that are ongoing in terms of operationalizing remotely sensed snow information So one project looking at provincial scale analysis of snow cover from the MODIS and VIR systems, as well as developing a workflow for analysis of Sentinel data. And we're in the start of a partnership development with the University of Northern British Columbia to look at Sentinel-2 analysis in terms of assessing onset of melt, snowpack ripening, and these kind of things for key watersheds across the province. I mentioned our seasonal forecasting program and really looking at the statistical side of the analysis, but we've also got an ensemble streamflow prediction system that we use for seasonal forecasting on the Okanagan River system, and we're in the process of doing some recalibration of that model this coming year. And I think the hope is that we'll be able to continue to expand the simulation side of the seasonal prediction systems that we're using for our other watersheds. We're also in the very early phases of looking at a fuse implementation. I think some of the lessons learned this year, and I'll go into a little bit, is the amount of spin-up time in terms of getting IT projects run through the province is pretty considerable. So I suspect that it will be probably a year of planning right now at this stage to start to look at some pilot projects in the following fiscal.
Hey, Dave, just 1 minute, please.
Okay. So I'm sure most of these challenges we're going to talk about in the side of things. Really, one thing we're seeing is incredibly unusual flows recently. I'll just put an example there, where we've where we're seeing a lot of rivers that are outside of the historic range of flows. That's posing a lot of challenge for us just in terms of the resourcing side of things. For example, last year, the flood season, we reached up to about over 100 days of continuous flood warnings, advisories that were out. And so that's really putting a lot of stress, I think, on the team trying to really maintain the service that we're providing year round. I think a lot of these other things are going to be details that we can dive into in the breakout session. So I won't go into too much detail there, and I'll wrap it up.
Great, thanks. Let's, I forget who's presenting for Alberta, but if you want to share your screen, and while you're doing that, if there's any quick question for Dave. Yeah, we've got one from Dominic. Dominic, do you have a question? Not sure if you're trying to speak, Dominic, if you need to unmute your microphone.
He doesn't have control to mute.
Oh, okay. So we have to unmute him. Are we able to unmute Dominic real quick, or we will have time for questions later too if we can?
Yeah, okay, sorry. Didn't have so my girlfriend knows a little bit of sign language, but not me, so unfortunately didn't have any control over the yeah. Just a very quick question, David. I was wondering, with regards to the project you mentioned for remote sensing of snow cover, is it actually aiming at providing snow water equivalent values using satellite data?
Yeah, at this point, primarily focused on the MODIS and VIRS data sets, and with a focus of just snow cover as being a snow-free analysis. And really, I think our hope is just to be able to get a sense of how much of the basins in our watershed basins are still covered with snow right now. We're doing a lot of that by our partners are just by going up in an airplane and flying around. It seems not as cost effective as having a full data series and time series of that. So that's going to be the most focus is just on the snow cover. And I think we're going to be looking with some of the other projects in the future to obviously, if we can develop a spatial sweep product, that would be golden for us.
Very good. Okay, let's Thanks, Dave, and for your question, Dominic. Let's move to another Dave or David. David Watson from Alberta. Go ahead.
Perfect. Thanks for the introduction. Can you hear me? Perfect. As mentioned, I'm David Watson. I'm with the River Forecast Center in Alberta. We're going to focus on, we're kind of in a transformative period in Alberta, and we got a lot of new things that we're onboarding and implementing and going to be using in the next couple of years. So we're kind of focused on those initiatives in this update. Just a little bit of a background. Alberta has 6 open water forecasters and 3 full-time ice forecasting staff. We operate in our respective periods. On the open water side, we have about 150 gauge locations which we can provide model runs for, and we're more focused on flood events and that sort of operation. So we run our models, provide public forecasts, as well as be in quite close communication with internal government responders and local emergency managers. Likewise, the ICE team monitors ice conditions around the province and provides kind of on-site support to the town of Peace River and Fort McMurray, where historically there's been more ice issues in the past. So what we're doing going forward is that we're going to talk about our upgrades to the rivers.alberta.ca public advisory tools. We've implemented a Delft Fuse platform, which we're going to call our Alberta River Forecast System, and I'll talk about where we are with that. We've undertaken a Alberta forecasting model assessment project to see and compare different models against the model that we're currently using and see if we can get better results going forward without sacrificing our time and ability to provide that kind of timely update. As well as our colleagues over at the flood hazard team have a new flood awareness mapping tool, which is pretty neat and ties into what we're doing a lot. So we'll speak to that. So currently in our public advisories on the rivers.alberta.ca website, as well as our mobile applications, if you search Alberta Rivers, we still give a lot of our advisories in text format through different tables showing the level of advisory, as well as accompanying text to give more detailed information. But our geographic ability to show where they're going to be is right now on the left-hand side of the screen. So where we can highlight individual river gauge stations with the current level of advisory. The major river basins are color-coded according to the most severe advisory in that basin. But that's not really, specific enough for a lot of our clients, and so we're gonna use smaller river subbasins, which we have available from our regional hydrologists who use them for their water shortage advisories, as well as repurpose our ice polyline ice classification segments and kind of make those available to producing advisories on the major river basins, in Alberta. So between the combination of those smaller subbasins, which can be individually color-coded, as well as color-coding segments of the major rivers, we hope we can give a better indication to both the public and internal emergency managers within the province about where those different advisory types and risks may be in the province. We've also implemented, like I said, a Delft Fuse system. Currently, we've used it, obviously, like most folks have, to streamline existing workflows, data preparation, weather model selection, model runs, some powerful tools in there to be able to give forecasters an easier time gaining situational awareness, as well as what's potentially upcoming with the weather. We've also added new functionality. Our ICE team has partnered with Quebec, as was shown a little bit yesterday, to have the ability to acquire satellite imagery in Fuse. And they're using this to kind of support the development of potentially some ice classification algorithms. So there's some neat work being done there. Our ICE team would like to continue doing this work, so if anybody is interested in partnerships, I'm sure that they would be willing to hear you out. Our model assessment tool, we picked about 9 different models that we're not currently using, and we compared them in kind of 2 different scenarios in Alberta. In some areas, we have a high gauge density and therefore more information and data to actually drive the models, as well as reservoir operations, which can complicate things a bit. So we picked the Red Deer River to test in, as well as we picked the Simonette River. It's a little bit more northern. It has extremely low gauge density, limited radar coverage. So there are some different challenges in how we model things there, as opposed to areas that we have higher density of data. So we've gotten completed kind of results from those 9 different models, and right now we're doing a statistical assessment of the model. And that'll be peak and timing, as well as, you know, some other parameters that are important. How long do they take to spin up? How long do they take to run? Kind of what's the time requirement in dealing with those models? And all of those things we'll use to assess internally about whether or not we should move to a different model and how that will be implemented, and all sorts of future discussions will likely come from there, but we're currently in the assessment stage of the outputs that we currently have. And then our flood hazard team, you see on the left there, we have the hazard mapping, which has been kind of the traditional product that we've seen, but they've recently underwent a significant project to kind of expand the river kilometers and ranges and different product types that they have in their studies and the new models that they have. So out of that became some new products that they've put on flood.alberta.ca. All these things are live right now. You can go check it out, but you can select different return periods and get inundation extents at different areas. So maps are interactive, so clicking on them will give you things like flow and depth and stuff like that if they're available for that particular area. You can select a range of inundation, so a low point and a high point, and it'll show you the different inundation areas that are affected by that, as well as a 30-year likelihood tool. So if you're in any particular area during the length of a typical mortgage, what are the chances of you getting wet or getting impacted by a flood in that location? They're also going to work on future internal products that we can better give to local emergency managers. So we'll, on the forecasting side, we'll run our models, come up with a flow value or flow range, pass it over to our hazard team. They'll use the products that they have and come up with a customized map that in turn the local emergency managers can use to better interpret what flood potential they have. And that's kind of a whirlwind tour of what we have. And I will stop sharing my screen so the next presenter can get ready.
Great. Thanks for that, Dave. Appreciate it. Any quick questions? Well, I think we've got, okay, so go ahead, Al. I think Curtis is going to load up his screen as we go here.
Okay, thanks. Thanks both Daves for those great talks. So listening to some of this with the with the ice remote sensing work, which I think NRCan led years and years ago. And then you know, some of the work Dave mentioned with the stormwater equivalent mapping and whatever. I'm just throwing this out there. I wonder if maybe the community practice could start looking at that from a national, I don't want to say federal perspective here, to start pulling those things together, right? So one of the outcomes of the meeting might be get a task team together on working with NRCan to make these products operational, right? And do whatever it is that you need and set some specs. And I'd argue you could probably make the same argument on the water equivalent side, right? About having testing some of the products coming out of CMC as an example, right? Instead of everybody kind of reinventing the wheel. So I'm just throwing that out there as a possible outcome for the end of the day here, Jacob and Evan. Thanks.
Thanks, Al. Okay, thanks again, Dave. Let's go ahead with Saskatchewan and Curtis.
Hi, well, good morning, everyone. So yeah, I'm Curtis Hallborg. I manage the flow forecasting and operations planning group here with the Water Security Agency in Saskatchewan. So yeah, just first off, I want to thank Al for mentioning the passing of Bart Ojima. He brought me into the hydrology group here in Saskatchewan and was a tremendous mentor to me and lots of other young hydrologists. So yeah, he's really going to be missed. So, oops. So the flow forecasting and operations planning group with the Water Security Agency provides general water flow and water supply forecasting service for the entire province. So for the most part, that's limited to just our snowmelt runoff potential mapping that we do. So we issued a map in early February, and we'll issue an update next week. So we have snow surveys happening right now across the province to help support that. And we'll also issue high stream flow advisories for areas of the province during events. But for the most part, we limit our detailed forecast for urban areas where we know there is development within flood hazard areas and where we have major dams and reservoirs that we manage. So our group, in addition to the flow forecasting, provides operational planning for our major dams and systems. So that includes the Qu'Appelle River system, which has 6 control structures on it, Souris River, where there's 3 dams here in Canada, Gardner Dam, Lake Diefenbaker, as well as Duncairn and La Flèche dams. So we'll also provide operational guidance to our regional operators for the other dams in the province. So the map on the right there just shows the 72 dams and control structures that the Water Security Agency is responsible for. And we'll also work with SaskPower for the management of their reservoirs during flood events. So we have some protocol agreements in place with them, outlining different roles and responsibilities, who's doing what during an event. So just quickly looking back at where we were, going back before 2012, we had a single individual within our hydrology services group that had the forecasting and operational planning responsibilities. There was no dedicated budget for this function and quite antiquated tools. So more regression type relationships like we have shown on the right, and really only designed for snowmelt runoff only. And we relied on hydrology services staff during those large events. So going back to 2010, we experienced a number of significant flood events within the province. So starting with Maple Creek, 2011 flooding on the Souris, and 2014 flooding in East Central Saskatchewan. So if you look at these pictures, they all have one thing in common, and that's there's green. So they were rainfall runoff events, which was a really big change for us. Traditionally, most of our significant runoff events had been snowmelt events, but we were seeing flood records here that were rainfall runoff events. So those were events that we weren't equipped for. And there's also research showing that these multi-day large synoptic events are increasing in frequency. So the response from the province was, as a part of this 25-year Water Security Agency plan, our Water Security Plan that was issued in 2012, was an action dedicated to flood damage prevention and emergency response, and an action to develop improved flood forecasting tools. So that came with some additional funding in 2014 and again in 2018. So kind of going with this growth plan in Saskatchewan. Our team is growing, so now we're a team of 5, a distinct work unit within the agency, a dedicated budget, and so far our focus has been on tool modernization. So when we kicked off that project of modernizing our tools, we looked to the University of Saskatchewan, John Pomeroy and Kevin Shook to give us some guidance there. There's literally hundreds, if not thousands, of hydrological models out there, and we didn't want to just start picking them willy-nilly, and knew that we had a complicated hydrology here with the prairie pothole landscape and cold region processes. So I'm not going to go into detail here on the key findings. I'm sure the slides will be provided, or if you want to see this report, I'm more than willing to share it. So when we moved into this tool development, we started with hydrological modeling. We concluded a model intercomparison project in 2019, where we took 5 hydrological models, two watersheds here in the province, and put these models head to head. And we landed on using mesh and the Hyper model in Raven. So Hyper is a HBV combined with PDM ROF. So that's a model that Mohammed Ahmed had developed as part of the FloodNet research program. So that's where we landed with hydrological modeling. As I said, we also have reservoirs that we are responsible for. So we've started developing ResSim models for those key dams and reservoirs. And then there's a need for some routing. So we've developed some 1D unsteady HEC-RAS models for key locations, and worked with James Craig and one of his postdocs to develop a hydrological routing model for the Saskatchewan River Basin in the Raven environment. So just a quick look at how those components would fit together. This is the Swift Current Creek watershed. So we'd have this upper basin hydrological model feeding into Reed Lake, which is the reservoir behind Duncairn Dam here. We'd have that ResSim model for that structure. We have a RAS model that would route those reservoir outflows down to the city of Swift Current here. And then a mid-basin hydrological model that would model these local flows between the dam and the city, and feeding that in, combining it with the routed flows from the RAS model to get that total hydrograph of the city. So lots of pieces there to be pulled together. We also knew that we couldn't be building these tools for every single creek in the province. So we went through a paired ranking process in 2019, looking at a number of criteria here, from water supply, economic importance, dam safety, flood protection, and social value and recreation, to prioritize watersheds for tool development. So we landed on these 5 watersheds here: Saskatchewan River Basin, which would extend into Alberta, Swift Current Creek here, which I just mentioned, Wood River here above La Flèche Dam, Souris River Basin, and the Qu'Appelle. So that's been our focus. So we built those tools, and now in 2020 we shifted into bringing all those components together within a FUSE environment. So following a RFQ process, we contracted Deltaris to implement DelFuse. So we started with a pilot project on the Souris River, which is nearing completion. There's a few bells and whistles to still implement on that prototype system, and then we've also started to move into phase 2, where we're expanding that into 4 additional basins. So 2 that we're going to implement here with our staff at WSA, and 2 that Deltaris is going to implement in parallel. So the hope is there at the end of the day, we would know our own system inside out and be well prepared. I just got a couple slides left. Also working on product development. So we're working towards a system where we'd have a map-based interface on our website. It's a number of forecast points where a user could click on and bring up a hydrograph. So looking at showing observed, forecasted with some uncertainty, and maybe some thresholds here. So as far as what's next, we're looking at integrating our team within that new state-of-the-art system. So the way I look at it, we kind of have the driver, we have the engine in our tools and Delphuse, and it's kind of bringing that all together within the car. So, needs such as, we're building an operational center to work within during events, upgrades to our websites to better communicate the new information we're going to have. We needed some investments in climate stations, and then some policy procedure type things. So updating the agency's flood operating plan. COVID has really brought the need for business continuity plans to the forefront. So looking at that and looking at components such as IT supports and backup, and then implementing a couple HR type policies around shift work and leave blackout policies to just kind of bringing that more operational function to the group. So that's everything I had here today. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Curtis. So we'll head to Manitoba next. If you've got presentations and want to share your screen, great. Al, you've got your hand up still. Not sure if that's still from the last question. Anybody else, you or anybody else have questions?
No, and it's down on my side, so I'm not sure why.
No, it's down now. Nice for me too. So, okay. Not seeing any questions. Do we have someone from Manitoba that's planning to say something or present? Are you perhaps muted? In which case, note in the chat and we'll make sure you're a presenter. Tell you what, let's go to, we'll go to Yukon then. And we got Holly. So Holly, go ahead and share your screen. And if there's anybody from Manitoba that's planning to present and you're not a presenter, please note it in the chat and then we'll ensure that you get added and we'll come back to you. Go ahead, Holly.
Hello, can you hear me and see my screen?
We can hear you fine, and there's your screen. Perfect.
All right, great. Thanks for having me. My name's Holly Goulding, and I'm the Senior Scientist Hydrology for the Water Resources Branch for Yukon Government. I thought I'd start my presentation just by providing some context for Yukon. John gave a great presentation yesterday on the Yukon River, Porcupine River Streamflow Forecasting Program. He mentioned a large jurisdiction with few communities located along major floodplains. Our floods are primarily driven by ice breakup, freshet, as well as freeze up, and convective storms are increasingly impacting transportation infrastructure. We do have limited monitoring data. Historically, we've had only one forecaster among many other hats that this position has worn, and our forecasting has been focused event-based during the breakup and freshet period. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the evolution of tools that are available for forecasting over the last couple of years, and also focus on some future directions and a few challenges that remain. So in terms of hydrometric and meteorological stations, we have a series of stations on larger systems in our partnership with Canada. We also have a smaller system that gives us insight into smaller streams that we run internally. And an upgrade to that system in the last couple of years has been upgrading those stations to real time. So that's been a great support for our flood forecasting efforts. We have 2 remaining station upgrades coming this year. For meteorological and snow networks, we benefit from MSC stations, but also a series of fire weather stations in the territory. And we have 4 combined snow, pillow, and MET stations, and a couple other MET stations that we run internally, and we'll be adding 1 station this year as well to that network. We also have our snow survey station sampled as part of our snow bulletin program in March, April, and May every year. And we manage our data internally for our networks now in Aquarius NG in the cloud. Some tools that help us with ice breakup, satellite imagery. We've been using ice classification products for breakup for a number of years on the Porcupine and Yukon River, and we've started using those for freeze up in the last few years. In Dawson to assist with ice bridge certification, and this past winter in Carmax for situational awareness for a dynamic freeze up event. And as others have mentioned, this spring we'll be getting our data through RadarSat Constellation mission. We contract that out to Secor, and we've also used Dromadair in the fall time. So interested certainly in the discussion about combined efforts to acquire and use these products. We've also increasingly been using Sentinel-2 imagery for visual ice observations. For breakout models, we now have 2 breakout models for Dawson, and those provide increased ability to predict breakup. We did, as part of the last NDMP cycle, have work advanced on a Porcupine River model, but we don't have any other models for breakup or freeze up for any other community, so that's certainly a gap for us. In terms of observations, we've benefited from new camera deployments, new satellite camera deployments by Environment Canada, our Wildland Fire Group, and as well we have 1 camera that we deploy for breakup at Dawson. Local observations, and we do conduct observational flights for breakup for Yukon River at Dawson and Porcupine River at Old Crow. In terms of streamflow forecasting, John gave a great presentation yesterday. We do have our mesh models that have been created with the partnership with Global Water Futures, so that's added some great capabilities for freshet and throughout the summer and fall period on the Yukon and Porcupine Rivers, with the additional simulations for Klondike, Stewart, Pelly, and White, and then also an older model on the Liard. And John also showed sort of the forecast outputs that we were receiving to assist with our flood forecasting efforts, and those were available daily in 2020. In terms of future directions, we're in the process of initiating a larger evaluation of our hydrometric, meteorological, and snow networks internally, and that'll help to assist with, to inform any additions that might help with our flood forecasting efforts, along with some other needs and the pressures of monitoring for climate change. We are getting Global Water Futures team support to run our mesh models this year again, but we're in the process of initiating a Delfuse pilot with Deltaris for the Yukon mesh models this year. So that should hopefully add to our ability to run those models ourselves. On flood mapping, we're continuing to work towards the completion of community flood maps, and we were also initiating a project now looking at the analysis of flood risk along Yukon's highway network. And that's with our Highways and Public Works group, part of a climate change vulnerability study looking at all geohazards along Yukon's linear infrastructure. And the funding for a good part of the funding for a lot of these projects is available through our climate change strategy that was just released last fall. Another exciting development is we've been able to double our forecasting team from 1 to 2 on a trial basis. Anthony Beard joins us on the call today and this week, and he is joining me from our hydrology team to support the forecasting side of things. So that should be really great for the next little while. And another area of focus is communication protocols. In Yukon, our emergency measures organization is the lead for public advisories, while Water Resources, we lead flood-related briefings. And in 2020, we saw a huge increase in interest in flood conditions, given the high snowpack we had and COVID response ongoing. So we're expecting high interest again in 2021. So kind of thinking through tools and processes for improving our communication to the public will be important. Also expanded collaboration on interjurisdictional basins through our bilateral water management agreements under the MRVB, and also hopefully increased opportunities for collaboration with the adoption of the Delfuse platform, perhaps as well with the Alaska River Forecast Center. I just wanted to end by chatting about a few of our gaps and challenges. Again, our limited resources and small team is certainly an area for us that's a challenge. For hydrometric meteorological data, of course, coverage is certainly a challenge. Our coverage of small watersheds, winter discharge estimation, convective precipitation, as that's becoming increasingly important, not for our transportation infrastructure. The assimilation of available data into reanalysis products, reliable SWE data. We'll need to continue development of breakup, freeze up, and our mesh models, and that's certainly an area where we need to put more focus and could use some resourcing. And then continued challenges related to real-time data transmission in the north, the reality of river ice processes impacting some of our more serious flooding, permafrost glaciers, some of the things that John mentioned that makes forecasting and modeling in the Yukon challenging, and of course, changes to our flood regime as a result of climate change. So that's all I had. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks a lot, Holly. Any quick questions before we move on to the next? I think we're going to go to, if we've got somebody, I don't know if Sean or Ryan from Northwest Territories, I think we're going to go to you next if you plan to speak or present anything. Any questions for Holly while we're doing that? While we are transitioning, if you are planning to present later this morning and you're not listed as one of the presenters already, so under the participants list, if you're under the was it guests here, I think, and not, or attendees and not presenters, and you want to present, please let us know, and we'll make sure you get up into the. Okay, great. And I see Ryan's getting ready here, and Sean. Okay, so if you're looking to present, please let us know in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll make sure that you're promoted to presenter. Okay, thanks again, Holly. I hope the increase, doubling of your staff there is on a trial basis is successful. A very small team, but hopefully, I'm sure you're very capable and great to hear. Okay, okay. So Ryan or Sean, go ahead and take it away.
Awesome, thanks, Jacob. And you can see our screen? Good?
Yep. Yes.
Perfect. All right, well, yeah, thank you. Sean and I are the two hydrologists here with the Government of the Northwest Territories, and we'll give you an overview of what we currently do and what we do not do in terms of flood forecasting in the Territory. So currently our jurisdictional capacity, we don't actually provide any flood or flow forecasting services. Unfortunately, just because we don't provide flood forecasting services doesn't make us immune to flooding. We have about 9 or 10 communities in the Territory that are susceptible to flooding. The main cause of flooding is during the snowmelt period, during the ice breakup period, with ice jam flooding with all of our north flowing rivers. The town of Hay River is particularly sensitive to ice jam floods. We have had some work with some academic partners in the past, this before my day, but there has been some work to develop some models on the Hay River to predict ice.
Ryan, just to interject, are you able to go into presenter mode or share the screen with the full size presentation?
Oh, I thought I was.
We're seeing the like the slides view with the. Try that.
Is that better or no?
No. Do you have two screens? Maybe you're projecting onto a larger screen.
We're
in which case,
on a TV in a boardroom, and I haven't done this before.
Yeah. If you is there a reverse? Anybody have a suggestion on how we can get this?
Slide.
I had on the Teams thing, if it was under the share content, there's some options around which screen is sharing under the controls.
Yeah, that's right too. If you go up to the where you hit share, if you should have two options, probably if you're on a big screen, don't select that one. Select the big screen. Yeah, so nope, still the same screen.
Screen one, maybe? Desktop.
You might even have to scroll down a little bit to find it.
Okay, is this any better?
No, it's still the same one.
No, that was
there, done. You're good.
Okay, perfect. Awesome.
Good, thanks.
All right. Well, that's one challenge down. Next up, flooding. So yeah, there are about 9 or 10 communities in the Territory that are susceptible to ice jam floods, but right now, operationally, we don't do any flood or flow forecasting. Some of our main challenges are data gaps in our monitoring network. We have limited hydrometric data availability. We have limited climate monitoring ability to feed and drive and inform model development. And also climate change is having a huge impact on the territory. We're seeing increased variability to stream flows and water levels, and we're seeing things that we haven't seen before. So some of these risks are, I'll start out by talking about what happened last year in the summer of 2020 and what's ongoing in 2021 on Great Slave Lake and in the territories here. And Al gave a nice talk yesterday on sort of how we were able to leverage some support from Environment Canada, some really great support from Environment Canada scientists. So as you can see on this plot here, between the years 2015 and 2021, 2020, we've essentially gone from the lowest water levels on record on Great Slave Lake to the highest water levels on record, and the highest levels by quite a bit right now, actually. So this increasing variability is really challenging. We have a lot of questions from the media. How will climate change impact Great Slave Lake and the Mackenzie River going forward? And these are huge systems, and our understanding is pretty hydrological processes in this area is pretty limited. So we're trying to better understand how these systems function hydrologically, and also what can we do? How can we expand our capacity to do any sort of flow forecasting or prediction? So as I was saying, 2021, the year 2020, and coming into 2021 now, we've had a lot of media attention. We've had high water levels on the Slave River, on Great Slave Lake, Mackenzie River, some of the smaller rivers like the Tulston and the Tasman that are feeding into Great Slave Lake. There's just been high water levels across the board in the territory. And some of our unique challenges are a lot of the water, about 75% of the water that flows into Great Slave Lake is sourced from British Columbia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, flowing through the Peace River, the Athabasca River, and ultimately through the Slave River into Great Slave Lake. So it's a lot of territory to cover and a lot of interesting questions to ask that we just don't have answers to yet. And some things that we are able to do, we only have a team of 2 hydrologists. This room is our hydrological, it's our forecasting team, it's our hydrology team, it's our data collection team, our transboundary team, data analysis, our media team. Our responsibilities are quite broad. It's pretty neat in the fact that we get to do a wide gamut of activities, but unfortunately, when it comes to flow forecasting and modeling, we just don't have the capacity to develop tools in-house. So we're quite reliant on other groups and other organizations for collaboration to build our capacity and help improve what we can offer to the residents of the Northwest Territories. We do, since we are a field unit, we do have the capacity to install field equipment, to install more meteorological stations, or to change or maybe conduct snow surveys in different areas. So that's one of the unique opportunities that we do have. We can sort of tailor our data collection to better inform model development, which is kind of the neat advantage that we have. Some of the things that we have been doing, we've been developing some R scripts internally to help us just look at real-time hydrometric data. It's been really awesome now because we can ingest all the current hydrometric data across the territory at all the lakes and rivers and in jurisdictions to the south to see what's happening, which has been fantastic, and compare that to historical means and historical ranges for flows and levels. So that's been really great. And now we're bringing in some Environment Canada meteorological data real time, so we can see how much rain, how much snow there is in the landscape. But really, it's all still pretty primitive. Like to liken where we are right now with Curtis's pre-2012 slide with the little caveman there. We're getting a better idea of seeing what's out there and ingesting this data. We're doing some work with Richard Kelly's group at the University of Waterloo to evaluate some globe snow and some SSMI data to better understand and to look at some spatially distributed snow water equivalent products. But we're still pretty primitive in where we're at and how we can take that information and translate it into a usable product from a flood or a flow forecasting perspective. So as I said, some of our strengths, we do a lot of field work. We can do some specific water balance studies at some sites. We have Sean's run a very nice climate monitoring station of about 14 or 15 stations across the territory, which has been really great. We do snow surveys across the territory. We've been doing that for about 30 or 40 years. We have a lot of media questions asking, especially last year, asking why is the water so high? Where is it coming from? And it's tough when you have a 2-minute media interview to explain the hydrology of the Mackenzie River Basin. So some of our challenges and our strengths, and it's pretty fun to be able to get out and measure some of these parameters across the territory. Some of the work that we do right now, like I said, we're heavily reliant on products and collaborations from some of our partners. So a couple examples of some products that our federal partners at ECCC have offered. They offer a Mackenzie River forecast over the short term during the open water season, which is great. Arvid Silas and Chris Dirkson's group at Environment Canada are able to provide us some nice SSMI data to estimate SWE across the territory and in basins of interest. And that's been fantastic, especially these last couple of years during high water and with COVID. It's really expanded our ability to see what's out there. We have some new support from federal partners over the last year or so. Al gave, as I said earlier, Al gave a great talk on some of the work that ECCC has done with us to help examine some of the causality for the high water levels on Great Slave Lake last year. And we were able to work with ECCC, GWF provided a lot of support to that as well. So thanks to John Pomeroy in that group, and then some folks at BC Hydro, Alberta, Saskatchewan, BC. And sort of building on some of that work that was done last year, Evan and Dorothy are leading a great group, and Jacob too at ECCC to help us develop a Great Lakes dashboard to determine water levels on Great Slave Lake. So coming into this next year, when water levels are going to be at an all-time high around June, there's going to be a lot of ice moving around, and it's going to be moving around above water that we've never seen before. So areas like Yellowknife, which is typically not prone to flooding, some areas in Old Town might be susceptible this year, and there might be quite a bit of ice movement that we'll have to keep an eye on. So some of these initiatives, such as the development of this National Flood Forum and this community of practice is great. And I'd like to echo what Al said in a comment earlier. If there can some sort of like a national group looking at snow products across the country would be fantastic, and we would love to be a part of that. And just keep us informed on any research or modeling initiatives that you or your group may be doing in the Northwest Territories. We might be able to provide some additional data for you. That would also help us as we're doing network reviews for our hydrometric and climate monitoring stations. If there are different land cover types that are poorly represented, we might be able to offer some support there as well. And at the end of the day, we're interested in all the work that's being done across the territory. So feel free to reach out to Sean or myself if you're doing work in the territory and you have any questions at all. And then one other project that we're hoping to start. 1 minute here, Ryan. Thanks. One last project that we're hoping to start this year, going into next year, is linking a Delfuse platform with Raven model that one of James Craig's students at University of Waterloo wrote a couple years ago for the Liard Basin. There will be an open water system that won't touch on the ice jam component, but we're hoping that we'll be able to improve some of our abilities there. So thank you.
Great, thanks. Excellent presentation, Ryan. Any quick questions? Amber, we're going to go to Ontario next, so you can start prepping your presentation. I know just in speaking with you folks last few weeks, seems very familiar, just the discussion about Great Slave Lake and the high water event over the last year, and very familiar to the Great Lakes Laurentian. So I can't imagine you're a very small team up there. You've been very capable and doing a great job. So it's been a lot of parallels, and can't imagine how you guys can pull it off. So thanks for that. Okay, Amber, looks like you're ready to go. Go ahead.
Hi, yeah, I'm Amber. I'm from the Surface Water Monitoring Center in Ontario. Can you see my screen okay, Jacob?
I can, yes.
Perfect. So I am from the Surface Water Monitoring Center, as I said, and we're a team of 10. We have a bunch of different skills ranging from policy and program, and we have 4 duty officers in our team as well. And we are one unit within the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, but we also collaborate with other units within our ministry. And we also have conservation authorities that Jacob mentioned this morning as well. So we collaborate a lot with them. My presentation is very quick because I focused on some updates, just updates since we talked a couple years ago. But if you ever want a refresher on what we do, I would be happy to talk or answer any questions. So go to the first slide here. One of the biggest government actions or activities that took place for us since we chatted last was in response to widespread flooding in 2019. Ontario hired a special advisor on flood, and that's Doug McNeil, and I think he came from one of the prairie provinces, and he completed an independent review of the 2019 flood events in Ontario. And this report reviewed the province's current flood management framework, and it considered policies, activities, all of which influenced spring flooding, and it also considered the Great Lakes and urban flooding. One of the conclusions that came out of that report was that nothing pointed to human error or the negligent operation of water control structures. It was just the sheer amount of water on the landscape, so snow and rainfall. I think we all kind of breathed a collective sigh of relief at that. The report developed 66 recommendations, which gave us a lot to think about and start planning for. And the recommendations were for multiple ministries and agencies and covered a really wide range in topics related to flood, so policy, planning, operations, communications, monitoring, science. It covered a lot of ground. And then in response to that report, Ontario completed a flood strategy. And so basically this just solidified our province's commitment to making Ontario more resilient to flooding. The strategy itself is organized into 5 priorities related to flooding, and there's one specific priority called Enhanced Flood Preparedness, which is where the surface water fits in really well. It kind of goes down and breaks things into further actions. And one of the actions is enhanced flood forecasting and early warning. So that really excited us. It's big news for us. The report also makes a number of recommendations that support the flood advisor's report. And some are as simple as keep doing what you're already doing. It's valuable, where others require more significant planning. And I also just want to note here that no additional funds were promised to make any of these commitments or to go with the strategy. So any work we do has to be done with the current resources. And then since we last talked a couple of years ago, we have embarked on a few projects related to forecasting. And this list I have right here focuses on provincial initiatives. So as I mentioned earlier, we have 36 conservation authorities in Ontario as well that provide local flood warning. So they're doing a variety of activities as well. And I'll just touch on each of these really briefly. And the first bullet has to do with science and research. So we have a science and research branch, and Bob Metcalf has joined us for this workshop as well. And he's leading up these 2 activities that are at the top of the page there, which are specifically related to the flood strategy and forecasting initiatives. And the first one is linking trends in high flow events to trends in water balances. And Bob is also working with the Raven Hydrological Framework to understand runoff generating mechanisms in a specific watershed, the Petawawa River watershed. And the rest of the initiatives are within the Surface Water Monitoring Center, where I am from. We have applied for some NDMP funding to pilot a WAT flood model on the Severn River. The developer, Dr. Nick Cowan, has already developed the model and offered it to us, and we're really excited to explore the logistics of running an operational flow forecasting model in our center, because right now we don't do that. We are also updating our Great Lakes operational storm surge model, and this is something that Jacob also mentioned this morning. Our system was in need of both a hardware and software update, and we're also really excited that the forecast will be able to be extended from 48 to 84 hours. Also related to this storm surge model update is accessibility, which is something we are working towards across the board in the Surface Water Monitoring Center. The next one, we are also in the baby stages of formally assessing our modeling needs. We've been thinking about doing this for a long time, and it really aligns well with the flood strategy I've mentioned. And at this point, we are in the policy review phase, like looking at historical policy documents to determine if we are in fact meeting our legislated requirements for forecasting. And we're not done yet, but a preliminary review indicates that we are, but perhaps our agency and our structure has evolved over time to a point where we need to promote change and do some enhancement. And I'm really excited to start discussions both internally and externally with partners about how we might be able to include some of these federal products that we're talking about today into that assessment. What do I have next here? The API, we also run a simple antecedent precipitation index model that is requiring a refresh, and we're going to get into that next year. We're just looking at options to see how we might like to proceed with this update. In Ontario, we also have the Ottawa River that has a shared watershed with Quebec. There's a forecasting committee that produces a flow forecasting model for this space, and we're really thrilled to now have the mechanism to ingest those model outputs into our database. It just provides us with more flexibility on sharing that information. And lastly, I just added this because somebody else triggered this. We added some statistical thresholds to our map-based data viewer that partners have available, and we did this for all of the Water Survey Canada stations. So that's another tool that we've updated and have available. And then I just kind of wanted to finish this off with overall what we've noticed in relation to the flood strategy and things like that. There's a really big focus on communications in Ontario and improving the communications of very technical information in ways that make it understandable to the municipalities and the public. So that's just something that has risen to the top over the last couple of years. And that's really all I had. Like I said, I am really excited to talk about this more. And if you have any questions or ideas or suggestions, I would love to hear from you. And there's my email and my supervisor Dave's email, and also Rob Metcalf from Science and Research Branch. And that's all I was going to say, Jacob.
Awesome, thanks, Amber. Really appreciate that. We've got time for a few questions if anybody has them. Just myself, I notice a theme among a few presentations already, and you mentioned it as well. Communication and being a big part of the forecasting process and communicating that to whether it's upper management or the general public. I think it's an important role for many of us. So thanks for highlighting that again. Okay, so I think maybe for those keen geographers out there, you maybe noticed I missed none of it, and I apologize for that, but they did opt to not present their forecasting ability and capacity right now is very limited, but for what we've also been told, they are very interested in the current efforts occurring nationally. So I didn't mean to skip over them entirely, but certainly some interest there among other parties as well. So we will continue moving east now. Dominic, we heard a great presentation from you yesterday. Did you have some additional points to make today?
Yeah, thanks. Are we kind of behind schedule or?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think we've got a bit of time. We can always steal some from lunch even.
Okay. So yeah, thank you. So I've been I won't be going over my presentation from yesterday. So of course I presented kind of how we're organized like that. So I'll more focus on the improvement project I talked about earlier to go into a little bit more details if it interests any of you. So yesterday I talked a lot about the current InfoClue project we have to provide flood forecasted maps for the next following days. I briefly went over the fact that, of course, to provide provide these kind of product that don't correspond always to a location where you have a gauge, we came up with some method to produce ungauged forecasts. So I'll just go over this in our Fuse system just to show you how it basically works. So the goal is that ultimately we want to provide flood maps that are continuous in our scope of project in the river reaches. So what we came up is that the small dotted place corresponds to our global, what we call our global platform, which is basically also a hydrological model, but that is run every day for the whole domain using SRPD, SGPD forcings from Weather Environment Canada. And then what we have to do is that at the big dots corresponds to validated forecast for gauges that are produced by forecaster. So what we do afterwards is that we use all this information that's point-based at our location, and we do some kind of optimal interpolation on the background, which is a global model, in order to take to use the information in the validated forecast to improve the background. So just to show you a concrete example, so this would be a forecasting location where a forecaster would daily produce a forecast, and this corresponds a little bit downstream to a point of discharge computation from the global platform. And what happens is that, as you can see on the red line, the global platform was kind of biased because, of course, the forecaster produced the forecast a little bit upstream in green, and what's happening is that it's you can see the observation there, but the observation is more around what the green line is giving. So what's happening is that the optimal interpolation process will correct the background information from the global forecasting product and produce at the same time different quantize of the possible discharge. And as you can see, the median just gets corrected down to whatever is well, pretty close to what's given by the forecasted location. Now, this is globally applied everywhere, and the method takes into account that, let's say, if you're a point over here, you take into advantage validated forecast around that was produced. But of course, this is not as simple as closest distance. It's really more kind of an interpolation based on the watershed shapes and the distance in between similarities. So and you have to take in this process into account local particularities, such as this is a managed reservoir. So on the downstream, just here, you don't want to correct the background using, let's say, this forecasting location, because of course it doesn't translate well because there's management that's forecasted. So that's kind of a hard mechanic to explain, but I just wanted to show you what's behind the hood of our new project. Now, yesterday I briefly also talked about the fact that there was this the project we had improving the snow cover data assimilation using methods developed by University of Sherbrooke. And just to illustrate the challenge that we have is that this is a snow water equivalent estimation on a grid, and it's kind of hard to see, but you see 2 points that are here and here that are encircled by a white line, which correspond to gamma monitoring of snow water equivalent. So that gives you continuous snow water equivalent. And then as you move forward in time, you get to a point where you might collect in situ measurements that you see appeared. And these are the big dots, and they come up once every kind of 2 weeks in the spring melt. And the smallest dots are actually SR50 instruments that measure snow height via acoustic captors, and they get converted to snow water equivalent inside using a neural network. And the aim of this project is, how can you do proper data assimilation from data that have high value of precision, such as in situ measurements, but comes up only once every 2 weeks. Continuous data from SR50, but that have less value because they are converted to snow water equivalent, and it's not there's error associated with it, and good information from gamma monitoring that's continuous but sparsely located in the domain. So what behind that, what the grid is giving is actually a snow model that is computing snow water equivalent, snow heights, evolution throughout throughout time. And you want to correct it using all of this information, but inside in a coherent way. So it's not as simple as direct insertion. So working with U Sherbrooke, they developed the particle filter method, and this is what we will be prototyping in the following years. And last but not least, I also talked about the fact that we want to produce dynamic uncertainty. So right now, if we go to a forecasted locations, what you get is we have a static envelope of uncertainty, which is based on past observation versus forecast, and it always increases, and it just depends on the lead time of the forecast, and it's a relative envelope. Now, what we want to do is that we want this to be a dynamic envelope that corresponds to assessing various sources of uncertainty. So what we have prototyped at this point is something like running a bunch of. So this is just one model. It's our hydrotel model, and this is the forecast that was validated this morning. But what we are prototyping is using many lumped model. As you can see, I think there are 20 trays. Yeah, there are 20 trays, 20 simple lumped model that are run then using ensemble forecasts, and that are starting from multiple state variables at T0 that are assimilated throughout an ensemble Kalman filter. And all of this, in the end, we aim at using it to provide a dynamic envelope. So that will be really coherent with the current state variable, the uncertainty associated with them, whatever's in the forecast as the ensemble weather forecast, and as well as assessing the fact that hydrological models, of course, are not perfect, and there's very uncertainty associated with the modeling process. So this is all I got for now. I just wanted to show you a little bit more detail and explain it to you using the system.
Great, Dominique. I think that's really a nice addition to your presentation yesterday. A nice live look at what's under the hood. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. Any questions for Dominique? And I guess apologies to Jennifer, I didn't see your hand shoot up, but I see that you and Amber have had some discussion in the chat related to different jurisdictions in Ontario. The Conservation Authorities is a pretty unique area of the country, and one that I'm also learning about. Oh, I see Al's got a hand up. I'm not going to miss that one.
Yeah, Dominic, I was going to ask you about the gamma flight. So is that a private sector company that does that? And have you looked at maybe LiDAR as an option as well, at least for snow depth? Thanks.
Yeah, so they're not actual gamma flights. They're actually static captors.
So
yeah.
In situ.
Yeah, so they correspond to weather stations. Some of them are from environment. Sorry. Some of them are ours from the Ministry of Environment, and some of them are shared from Hydro-Quebec. Sorry, this is the wrong map. So these are not snow flight. These are actually in situ measurement that doesn't change in time. So the station have a gamma monitoring captors, and it's always there. Yeah. So it gives continuous. These are in situ measurement that are actually done by the technicians that go outside. So we don't have any flight reconnaissance of snow water equivalent or snow height.
Okay. You'll see. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. There's no other questions. We'll move on to New Brunswick. I think Brent, you're planning to speak.
Yes, let me see if I can share this now. Share. Are we live?
We are live, thanks.
Oh, good. Well, welcome from New Brunswick. For those of you who don't know, my name is Brent Newton, and I'm the flow forecasting engineer for New Brunswick. And you're looking at a picture of the Sussex Tim Hortons during a flood in 2014. All right, I'll just quickly step through a few slides here highlighting our forecast system that we call MB Fuse. We're using software developed by Deltares for running our models and exporting results. One of the big sales pitches for us going in this direction was, and Dave Valley mentioned on Monday, that our neighbors to the south at the Nerve Sea, they're already using Deltares. And we've been very fortunate to be able to share data with them, and are more often than not on the receiving end of this partnership thanks to their generosity. We're using software from Kisters called Whiskey for our data management. Here we store a QA/QC and QA/QC climate data and perform backwater cuts during under ice conditions. We've got data from climate data, water level data, snow depth, snow water equivalent, we store in there. I shared this schematic at the workshop in Vancouver. It's just kind of shows our standalone system. We've since migrated to an operator client, or what they call a live system. Here's some advantages. Everything is hosted on a server instead of on my laptop. That's a huge advantage. Provides much needed system redundancies and allows for more forecaster redundancies. So our other forecaster, Jazz, can use it as well. Can access everything all on this live system. Here's just a few slides to give you a bit of a peek at our system. Here's just some flow hydrographs. It looks similar to Dominic's system. You can see our precip, temperature, everything's at your fingertips. It's very nice. Here's a view of our climate network. Here's the same data analyzed spatially. All right, and this slide illustrates the value of our partnership with the NERC a bit better, and it goes both ways. We share basins in the headwaters, so sometimes we do multiple iterations before publishing. We not only import their flow hydrographs, but we also their model inputs like precip and temp, soil moisture, and snow water equivalent. So this is just one example where this was the forecast from at Fort Kent 2 months ago, where we were attempting to forecast a Boxing Day rain event. So this is a couple days out, and you can see our two models, Raven and SAR. We're overdoing it quite a bit, but it's nice to kind of, you can see the observed there in purple and the NERC. So if sometimes if they're closer, or it seems often we're very similar, but if there's something up, then it just kind of perks our attention, and we can go in and look and see what they're using. Maybe their weather forecast is completely different. Maybe it's maybe in this case, I think it might have been the snow water equivalent. We might have. It's difficult not having snow measurements for December fall events. So anyway, you can see the difference there between our Raven and SAR and their NERC Sacramento model. And this is just a shot of our water level forecast. And I'll move on to our future work. Those are just a few things. We've got many other things off the corner of our desk, as most people do. But we would like to import radar precipitation data into Fuse. This would help us capture localized summer events. And currently we have a contract with Deltaris USA to update the HECRAS model adapter to be compatible with our 2D models and to configure them into Fuse. We can now import gridded ensemble forecasts into Fuse, and one day we'd like to produce ensemble water level forecasts. And we're slowly starting to work towards modeling other watersheds in the province besides the mighty St. John. We now have the framework for this, so now it's just a matter of finding the time for it. And that's all I had. Is there any questions?
Thanks a lot, Brent. Any questions for Brent? Al, your hand is still showing for me as up, but I'm not sure if that's from your previous question.
Yeah, no, I had a question, but it was more of a joke for Brent.
Go ahead.
We take jokes.
It looks like that's Daryl Pupek coming out of the Tim Hortons there at the beginning. Is that right?
Oh yeah, Daryl needs his double, you know.
Thanks for that.
I know I've heard you say, Al, when there's a flood, we want most people moving away from the water and technicians move towards the water, but maybe there's an exception for the Tim Hortons as well. So, okay, if we don't have any further questions, I think we're left to move to Nova Scotia. We've got Anna Marie, you're up.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Can hear you, yeah.
Great. Let me know when you can see my slides. Good.
We see it. Can you put it in presentation mode, or are you sharing?
I'm sharing just the application, so let me know if that works going into.
There you go. Yep.
Slick. All right. Well, so start with a little introduction. With myself, like some of our other provinces and territories, we are a very small team. Recently, we doubled our number of engineers with myself full-time. So though we don't do any flood forecasting, I did want to take the opportunity to talk about the strategies that we're employing to move ourselves in that direction. And of course, as we've heard share our experiences and what we're doing. But as a context for Nova Scotia, we are a relatively small province, but within that, we're also very diverse. So we have our storm events for flooding has always been diverse. So we've always had freshet events, convection storms, cyclonic storms, some ice jams in some of our systems. Coastal realities are definitely a driving factor or compounding factor as well for our storm events. The Bay of Fundy, of course, famously 17 meters of tidal range. So our communities have a lot of different needs, and within some context and contrast to some of you, these are our 5 largest drainage areas. So pretty small, but this map is really informative. So though we have about 40 drainage areas in the province, it's very hard for us to aggregate those. The 4 drainage divides that we have run into the ocean or the Bay of the Strait. So we have to really keep say an egalitarian approach to our programs, because about not quite half of our population is within the Halifax area, and everyone else is very rural and along the coast. So as I mentioned, we're not doing any forecasting. Our solitary EMO team member has over the years, progress that we have made is developing a really good data set of past events. And so they use this anecdotal community knowledge, looking at what conditions have resulted in what sorts of impacts, and that's the communication that rolls out to the government and out to our communities as well. So since the first meeting 2 years ago, besides adding myself as a resource, we've made progress on improving and updating our LiDAR. So of course, data is one side of thing. I'm going to talk a little bit more about our municipal flood mapping project, which is how we're trying to start grassroots and addressing modeling in all of our 40 catchment areas. In the meantime, of course, we have to plan for the development that's happening day to day. So we're working on the Coastal Protection Act, which I'll talk a little bit about in case that's of interest to anyone, because it's some pretty interesting risk perspective and leveraging relationships with our other departments. Similarly, we're looking at, in the meantime, as we gather these models and data, having an update on our provincial-wide climate change risk assessment. So that's looking at updating our risk identifiers and doing that priority setting so we can understand if flooding is really where our priorities are. For an example, we've had 2 of the most extreme droughts on record in the past 5 years. So drought, we expect, might in fact take a priority for us in terms of our staffing resources, because about 50% of our population uses private groundwater for their drinking water. So a little bit about the municipal floodline mapping project. So very similar to the work that the feds are doing in terms of the standards. We're working, I think we kicked off around the same time, or maybe a year or 2 before that, developing locally specific guidance and specifications to support our municipalities while they're trying to access the NDMP funding. So we've gone through the first iteration of that, developing a draft set of specifications and guidance. And so we're trying to move through taking some of the lessons learned from the first set of case studies and then updating those and looking to get them published in the next few months. And this, of course, part of this was writing in the fact that the models that would be developed would come into ownership with the government, so that we'd be able to leverage the work that the municipalities would be leading at their level. And in fact, a little plug for us, we actually got an award for the work that we're doing from the Commonwealth Association of Planners. So we're really pleased with the work that we've done, and we're expecting to see a lot of good value coming out of it. An interesting piece, of course, for how we're addressing as a small team, leveraging the amount of academic support that we can, was looking at how the province is handling climate change. So we don't have, the last time the climate modeling was done for the province was just over 10 years ago. So tied to the municipal floodplain mapping study was looking at how to weave this into these standards and looking at it specifically from an infrastructure lens. So over to the Coastal Protection Act. This is the other piece of how we're trying to work with municipalities to both protect what has already been built, but also manage what is going to be built in the meantime as we develop the data and the models. We have over 13,000 kilometers of very diverse coastline. And with our population being so spread out, making sure that our municipalities have access to technical expertise is an ongoing challenge. And at the same time, of course, needing to minimize regulatory burden. So we're taking an interesting approach with this where we're developing the regulations right now. So in yellow, what you'll see, that will be the back of our regulatory zone called the Coastal Protection Zone. But if you're within where the red dashed line is, the minimum building elevation, so this will really restrict any future development in direct proximity to the coastline. And that's specifically taking into account both the ordinary high water mark, but then sea level rise, and then climate change and storm surges. So looking at the province taking ownership of that risk assessment and climate modeling so that the municipalities can simply have like a land use zone that they can work with. And then our other project right now, I mentioned updating our provincial risk assessment. So it's really working to proactively prepare us both near-term and long-term impacts. We're looking at both the RCP 4.5 and 8.5 and using, of course, the usual steps out so that our projects can plan forward. And then, yeah, our last risk assessment was back in 2005. So since that time, even within the water branch, we've had a lot of restructuring. So we're trying to make sure that we have our priorities straight. So our staff, now that we've staffed up and reorganized, we're ready to move forward efficiently. So just an overview of our challenges and gaps. We continue to make progress in tools and resources. As we've heard from other folks, it's definitely a challenge for us. Similar to some of our other counterparts, we have very limited data. I believe we have about 30 stations for the hydrometric network. And then, of course, I added in the communication strategies. That's definitely something that we're seeing. We're trying to capture the lessons learned that we're seeing with our drought team to bring that forward into the flood forecasting. And that's it. Looking forward to discussing more with you this afternoon.
Great. Likewise. Thanks for that excellent presentation, Anna Marie. Congratulations on your award as well. If we have any questions for Anna Marie at this time, and again, apologies, I did miss another hand there, but it looks like there's been some discussion and questions asked and answered in the chat. So any further questions here now? We do, so just I think we're nearing the end of our expected presentations. I don't think we're expecting another one from Newfoundland. We had a great one yesterday from Ellie. So kind of open the floor here now, and also PEI is not planning to present today. So open the floor here now for any further questions for any of the presenters, any discussion prior to our lunch. Even if anybody has any, if there's any volunteers, if you have anything else you'd like to add at this point, whether it's shared or just discussed, please let us know. Brian, I see your hand up.
Hey, Jacob, it's Sean. We're in the same room, so
Right.
One of the few who can do that in the country. So a question mostly for Al, but anybody obviously could speak to this in regards to the comments about you know, this group using its numbers potentially to get NRCan or Environment Canada to look at stuff like the snow data nationally and have a standard or use that, take that advantage of the fact that we're all looking for the same information. What would be the suggested next steps on that to make that happen? Would that be through an HBCC and NAT or other means, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of ways to do it, right? I think, right now there's active discussions on the water agency, right? And so one of the themes that has come up through discussions in the department before I left was the whole cryosphere issue, right? Because we're not dealing with it very well in Canada. We really don't have a glacier mass balance program anymore. Snow data is all over the place. It's not well coordinated, right? I mean, Ross Brown's done some great work in ECCC on collating a database, but it is fragmented, right? And so I think this group actually, as a whole, can make some strong recommendations, right, for that, and see where it goes, right? I mean, if all the provinces agree that we should have a focus on, I don't know, river ice and snow and cryospheric processes as part of a greater water initiative and a greater flood forecasting initiative, that could be a conclusion coming out of this report. It gets sent up, and I think it would get a lot of uptake from the department and from maybe the political class as well, because they're looking to see what this new agency is going to look like, right? So, I would suggest we do it through this mechanism, and then see where it lands in the ECCC and in NRCan, and push it forward through this discussion around the agency. That would be my suggestion. It's worth trying, I think. Hope that helps.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Al. Thanks, Sean. Do we have any further questions? Oh, I see Vincent's got his camera on, his hand up, so go ahead, Vincent.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, everybody. Hi. Just would like to add something regarding the snow data. I'm Vincent Vionnet. I'm a research scientist at Environment Canada in the hydrology group, and we recently reached out to most of the agencies in the provinces and territories to get access to snow data that we are compiling in what we call the Canadian Historical Snow Survey dataset. And we are about to release the 2020 update, so that will combine like all the data into a single dataset that we will make publicly available to the community. So that's something, I guess, that's very important for the community, and we plan to do it on a yearly basis to be able to avoid the update only once every 2 to 3 years. We'd like to be able to do it at the end of each hydrological year to be able to release this update of the Canadian snow product. And I think that would be very valuable if the provinces continue to work with us together to provide us the data that we can treat, process, and put together in this dataset. So thanks a lot for sharing the data, and I hope we'll be able to continue in the next few years to provide the early update of this dataset.
Thanks, Vincent. Appreciate those comments. Do we have any other questions or points for discussion? You see there was a question in the chat related to, this was from Andre Jaguer, related to various weather models. This question posed to Dominic. Those being displayed as input and information for forecasters. Did you want to comment on that, Dominic? Or Andre, did you have anything further to add to that?
Sorry, did I miss a question that was?
Yeah. Maybe you already answered in the chat. There was a question that came up in the chat. See here from Andre Jaguer about different climate or different weather models being brought into your system.
Ah, okay. Sorry, I missed it. I'll answer in the chat. Okay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Dorothy, you've got your hand up, and go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, I thought you might be interested in what the anomaly is looking like at the moment, except it's just gone missing. Let me bring it up. Oh, sorry, I'm running into technical problems. Do you see that now?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so this is Canada-wide. This is the site. So you pick, I put it in the chat, you pick RDPS analysis, and down here we have Canada-wide. If you go to Eastern Canada, it looks okay to me, pretty much. Western Canada, we do have some anomalies. It's looking like at the moment. You have to choose 12 UTC, and it comes out around 1:30, sorry, 9:30 UTC every day. So this is yesterday's look. So I just thought you might.
Thanks, Dorothy. Appreciate that. I see there's, I guess there's a number of questions being asked in the chat as well. So I invite everybody to check those out, and there's some good responses in there also. I see one more hand up. My computer's slowing down a little bit, but I see a hand. Yeah, Praveen, you had a question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask this question to Ryan from the NWT, but it may be applicable to others as well. It's a bit more curiosity than a question. I was wondering if there are hotlines between the province during the flood season to communicate message or warning. I mean, like flows from the Bennett Dam in the Peace River in BC, it takes about 7.5 days to reach Pisathabaspa Delta and maybe a few more days to reach Great Slave Lake. But there are some good lead times available if, folks from the BC or Alberta, phone NWT and say, our flows are 50% or 80% off, or we're expecting flooding. So please be aware or something. So I'm Northwest Territory doesn't have forecasting system, so that may be helpful. So just wondering if there is some such kind of arrangements in place.
Hi.
Well, yeah, yeah, thanks. So I think the question was, is there any sort of agreement in place with our neighboring jurisdictions in the provinces to provide a lead time for if there may be a high water event? And we do have transboundary agreements with Alberta, and we're working with BC and Saskatchewan right now. Mainly what we do right now is we'll just watch the Water Survey of Canada, the hydrometric gauges, and see if there is any indication of high water moving through. And we're also in contact with folks in Alberta at the River Forecast Center if there might be high water events coming down. But nothing, we don't have an integrated model or a really formal process for looking at high water movement. If that was I think that was the question.
Thanks, Ryan. I think Jennifer, you also mentioned in the chat that Alberta has a technical level working committee with BC Hydro, working level relationship with BC Hydro. So some overlapping jurisdictions there, and transboundary, provincial boundary in this case, being an important thing to consider as well. So, Dorothy, you've still got your hand up, but I'm thinking that's related to your last comment. Anybody else? If not, we're plenty of time to talk about a lot of this this afternoon as well. So we're closing in on our allotted time. If anybody has anything else to add right now, please do so. But Otherwise, I think we'll wrap up. Good. Hearing nothing. So it is 12 or just about 12 Eastern time. So we ended right on time. We'll be coming back at 1 o'clock. So we've got an hour today. I don't think we should start early or anything like that. In case some people have already left the meeting right now, they'll be coming back at 1 regardless. So that's 1 o'clock Eastern. Al, did you have anything else to add quick before we head to lunch?
No, but we're going to ask the organizing committee. I think somebody's going to set up a breakout room just so we can have some discussions for some final thoughts by the end of the day. So I'll ask the folks on the organizing committee to hang out for 10-15 minutes, and then we'll everybody else enjoy your lunch and your break.
Very good. Very good. Thanks, Al. So yeah, organizing committee, hang around for 10 minutes, and then the rest of you we'll see you back at 1. We'll take it into the breakout session this afternoon. Thank you.